Yeah, thank you for having me, Christoph, and thank you to the people joining me during this talk. As I asked the conference directors to start projecting my presentation, I will spend a couple of words about the presentation itself. As you can see from the title, we will look at artificial intelligence from a design perspective. And we will actually talk about a very specific case, a very specific project that we ran last year. And actually, we are going to talk about a failure. And actually, this project was a failure. And I think that we speak too much about success and not very much about our failures. And at the end of the day, I'm convinced that failure defines ourselves much more than success. So I'm going to talk to you about the failure. I'm not scared. I will not talk about the client because he will be scared about declaring that this was a failure. But anyway, it's his problem, not mine. So, and we will talk about what we think and what we learned from this failure, which actually is already 2 years old right now. A personal note, I have a small Labrador Retriever puppy around the room, so there may be some interruptions and you may hear some barking. But this comes to the title of this presentation, which is Humanizing AI. And I think that this brings us to a broader concept about, how do we humanize work? Because if you look at what we do as designers, I think that being human is the most relevant part. And if we look at what happened in this pandemic, and if you think at the hundreds of conference calls that we had using so many platforms, Zoom, Google Hangouts, and whatever, and we see sometimes, kids running around and dogs barking and the typical sounds of an house. I think that this has made in some way also the work more human. So we have lost, I think, something bad. We have learned something new, and this is interesting. And so how does this apply also to the field of artificial intelligence? And this is the idea, and this is part of this presentation. So we have only 20 minutes, so I will not talk about myself. My ego is already satisfied. So let's go straight to what we are going to talk about. So every time I reach home, and actually when I am a few kilometers from home, the artificial intelligence in my house starts switching on the lights. If it is winter, it starts the heater and starts playing my, favorite playlist. And when I cross the door, it actually welcomes me with a welcome message. And I always surprised by this. And I think it's magic, even if I can title myself a designer right now, but I have a technical background. So I work on this personally. And every time I see it working, I think it's magic. Technology is still magic to me, even if I know how it works and what are, the bits and pieces that make it work. So what we can say is that really any advanced technology can be perceived by end user as magic. And this is extremely interesting, because magic, the first reaction is fear, how does this work? And, it's a little bit strange sometimes. But as designers, we think that if technology is the modern magic, for us as designer is a sort of lens that we can use to identify opportunities for our clients, but actually not only our clients, but the users of what we design for our clients. And we live in a complex world as designers because we really care about the experience that the end user is living when using a product or service. And on the other side, we are paid to solve business problems using design tools. And finding an equilibrium between these two things is our main task. And at the very same time, when you use AI, you need to find an equilibrium between the user and the AI itself. And this is probably the most important thing. And another important thing is that what you are going to see in this presentation is our point of view. It's not, you need to take this as the latent says, cum granusalis. Use your brain, use your soul, and see if it fits on how you view things. So this is what we think about it, but it's not, it's just a point of view. You can disagree. You are free to disagree. Actually, you should disagree. So what happened when we designed a robo-advisor? So what was the business problem? One of the biggest Italian private bank asked us to develop a digital tool based on artificial intelligence and machine learning in order to help their financial advisor to provide the best service and the best proposal and the best financial opportunities and investment opportunities to their clients. So this was the idea. So how can we empower financial advisor using artificial intelligence for their investment proposal? And the interesting thing is that when we started looking at this problem, we asked, so how much data do we have available? Okay, I needed to do a little step back because, we are designers and, how do you know about AI? Actually, the point is that Sketching is part of a bigger group, which is BIP Group, a management consulting company in Italy. And actually, we have different things inside this company, which are called Center of Excellences. And we have a Center of Excellence for design, and they also have a Center of Excellence for artificial intelligence and machine learning. And so we worked together in order to solve this problem. And from okay, let's keep this for later. So when we started looking at the data that was available, we saw that we had already more than roughly 50,000 contracts and proposal already available in order to start working on an artificial intelligence algorithm. And this was interesting because it was a huge amount of data, of valuable data that the company was sitting on. So a perfect starting point to train an artificial intelligence algorithm, and looked like a very good idea. And so we started working around that. And actually, we designed the service around this data. And this was interesting because before doing that, let's try to understand from a design perspective, what do we really need to help the financial advisor to solve their problems? And what we found was very interesting. Even if this was the most important private bank in Italy, they didn't have any digital tools to help the financial advisor building their proposal, or actually also accessing the incredible amount of data they were sitting on. Each single financial advisor had built his own tools to manage these things, some Excel stuff typically. So the first thing was trying to design a digital artifact that was fitting the artificial intelligence algorithm, and actually help them building proposal and making new investment. And this was extremely interesting. And we were thinking, wow, this is cool, and we are doing a great job, and this is going to work perfectly. At least this was our idea. And so we released what we call the Wise Advisor, which is a little bit of a bold statement, but designers are usually extremely bold and strong opinionated. So this was the name of, actually it's a fake name. I will not reveal the real name but I was trying to communicate the very same attitude that we had. And as always, the first tool that digitalizes the advisory moment. And this is how we sold this product to the senior management that was paying our bills. Unfortunately, something happened, and actually it was the artificial intelligence algorithm was built to serve the interface, the user interface that we designed for the tool. And again, there was a strong collaboration with the CA Center of Excellence of BIP called X-Tech, and this revealed also an interesting approach that you should always take in account, and this is part of Sketching philosophy. being part of a big management consulting company, but actually looking at the consulting market in a more general way, sometimes we are always pushed to sell more because we need to make our shareholders happy. Sketching position is a little bit different. So we sell what the client needs. And I think this is an interesting point of view. We know the problem. We don't need more money, more than that is needed to solve the problem. And at the very same time, we could have sold much more stuff in this project, but we went to the core of the problem because this is the idea. You need to solve a core problem and help the client solving this problem, and you need to deliver value. Otherwise, it's not human work. It's something different that we don't like. But anyway, this is probably part of a different presentation and a different conference. And actually, somehow I need to retain my job. So I will not go deeper into that road. So the most important thing is that when you talk about AI, you need to design for the future, because it's not just enough to solve a problem. You need to monitor, and actually you have heard this from the previous presentation. It's an artificial intelligence algorithm is something that always evolving over time. At the very same time, the digital tool is always evolving over time. So you need this sort of iterative process where you measure your artificial intelligence algorithm, you measure the user interface and the interaction between the human, the digital artifact, and the artificial intelligence algorithm. So it's not just, okay, it's done, next thing. It doesn't work that way. And actually, the idea was to use the data that we had to suggest the best investment for the specific client. How can we cluster the clients? What are the investment attitudes? How much do they want to risk their money and their portfolio? And this was the idea around which we designed the AI algorithm. And when we say we, I mean X-Tech and us, Sketching as a designer. And actually, one step ahead that we did is, okay, let's use AI to understand the data from the past, make suggestion to the user, but let's try to move a step further and actually let the AI customize the proposal for the specific client. And at the very same time, let's the fund managers know the decision that AI is making in order to drive future development of financial products. And I think this is extremely interesting because you already probably heard a lot about bias. And actually, as I told you, we were sitting about something like 50,000 proposals, but it is not neutral data, actually, because if you look at how these financial services are structured, the choices that a financial advisor makes are not always made in the interest of the client, but actually it may be in the interest of the company or in the interest of himself, because maybe you get paid more commission if you push a product instead of another. So there is bias in the data, and you need to be careful about this. It's not my field, but you have for sure heard about this problem in our talks during this day. So, what went wrong? Because it didn't work at all. And here's why. First thing was user didn't adopt it. And the biggest cause when we started investigating this is that they didn't trust the product itself and the culture of the company. And actually the fear was, okay, this is used to control the work I'm doing, how much time I'm spending on a client, what I'm selling, and in which way I'm selling it. So they really feared control from AI. And again, if you think about technology as magic, is something, they were thinking this thing had much more control on what they were doing, and it was not the reality. They were thinking the thing had much more control than it really had, and it was totally different. But the fear is actually extremely great from this point of view. And this is something that we didn't consider in the first place. And also, each AI algorithm has also to cope with the company culture. It can reveal many things, and some of these things may not be nice to see or discover. Moreover, and the reason was we designed it as a service with not a lot of human touch into it, just like the GPS, which has, if I think that each of us use a GPS in their car or traveling, hiking, whatever, and we really trust this thing, probably too much. And we were thinking that the user would have trust this service, this product, and this was not the case. This was not really the case, and this was extremely important to discover. So it's like building an AI and a product built around AI. I think it's like giving birth to an entity, and you need to give some personality to the entity. And as each living entity, as each other human entity, trust must be built. It cannot be imposed and it cannot be prescriptive. So you need to always think about giving humans the right to choose. It's like talking to an old friend, someone like me with white hair and probably some wisdom. But they are just, I can tell you what I think. I can tell you what I think you should do, but the final decision should be yours. And actually, you should take my, advice with all, in the right way. And you should design products around AI with this idea, just like talking to an old friend and just like, having advice from an old friend. And so we ended up with a post-mortem analysis with 6 points that are now the core of the way we design AI-centered products. So the first thing is actually always think about the openness and completeness of information that you give to your users. The users must have a clear idea of where you are taking the data, what the data is in there, how the algorithm is built, and all the details. The more details they know, the less they will think it's magic. So explain, told them how it works, which data is reported, and what is taken out of the use of the technology. And this is probably one of the most critical things. And again, point number 2, humans have the right to freely choose. Okay, the AI can make suggestions, but it must not be prescriptive. Apart if you're trying to kill someone, that depends on the field you're applying AI. And you need to create trust through experience. One of the biggest lessons was, let's think about progressive onboarding of users into the product. Let's just not expose all the capabilities and all the power of the product that we have designed. Let's make, just like when you start knowing someone, you start telling him something and probably not too much critical. And then as the knowledge progress, you expose much more data and much more information. The same should be done when you design products around AI. And you need to try to create a collaborative relationship between humans and AI. Humans must have the feeling that they can influence the behavior of AI according to their behavior. So somehow you need to have an algorithm tailored to each single user when it's possible, or at least making the user feel that there is this kind of approach and that there is a relationship between the algorithm itself and the users. And actually, the biggest point, but this is really more of a cultural thing, you should not use AI as a control system, which is a critical thing, I think. If you think about how much technology is nowadays influencing blue-collar workers and white-collar workers, you need to be careful because you can really get a lot of data, a lot of significant data. And since my time is over, and actually you need to talk about the value that you are delivering to both the end users and the user that is using your product and services. And this is really critical to me, which is why are we doing this? Which is the biggest question you should always ask. Why? What are the reasons? Because we are releasing this product. So my time is over. So I hope this has sounded interesting enough. Feel free to reach out to me if you want to hear and if you want to talk. I'm pretty much everywhere on social media. So you can reach me everywhere if you want to discuss further these ideas or talk in a more general way about the design and how we see things. So thank you for joining me. Thank you for Make Live having me, and I think you're going to have a great day.